So what we're going to take a look at here is basically how you can synchronize your Anaplan dashboards and also add in some labels just to make navigation a little bit easier and to make the overall experience a bit cleaner and slicker. So what I've got here is just a straightforward expenses application, and you can see that I've created two dashboards. I've got expenses here that I have open, and that's basically my input dashboard. I've got two modules sitting here, one for my mileage information and one for any other expense type information. This then all gets pushed through to my summary dashboard, which you can see brings together all types of expense and then displays some of that information graphically at the bottom of the dashboard. Now what you'll notice is that we have some common denominators, if you like, between the dashboards, namely the employee that you're entering the data for and the period that you want to submit the expense for as well. And that gets carried through to here. You can see again we've got periods and again by individual employee. Now what we want to make sure is that as we're entering data into these multiple modules is that we're entering it consistently. So obviously if I'm entering data for a particular employee and a particular expense period, if I start off by doing that in mileage, what I don't want to happen is that I then enter data here and about halfway through I realise that I'm actually looking at a different employee and a different period. I want to make sure that if I've chosen one item initially that flows all the way through. And in Anaplan dashboards that's a simple matter of synchronization. So if you look here, let's just say I go and change my employee information, you can see that that synchronizes through to both modules. Again, if I change the period that I'm looking at, you can see that that synchronizes through. It doesn't just synchronize through in that particular dashboard as well. If we go through to summary, you'll notice here the employee has changed, and again the graphical representations that are on a month basis have also changed. So that synchronization is flowing all the way through my open modules and my open dashboards. How do we do that? Well, if we come back here now as a workspace administrator, so do note this is as an admin, you set this up initially when you build the dashboard as an admin task. If you hover over to the left, you'll notice you always get one of these green circles with a little downward pointing arrow. If I click on there and then come down to selection options, you'll notice synchronized. What was it I wanted to synchronize? Well, I wanted to make sure I was always looking at the same employee and the same period. So employees, time, and ticks in synchronized paging, and that's what's enabling this synchronization all the way through. You'll notice that's also set up on here. And likewise on here as well. Now you can synchronize on other elements as well. You'll notice that's just on the pages, but if I wanted it to also synchronize, for example, in this instance against expense type, then you can also synchronize against that selection or what happens to be in your columns. Now you'll notice here in summary, because of the orientation I've given to the module, time is actually there on my columns. And that's synchronized paging, synchronized rows, synchronized columns. And as I said, that will be true for any module that you've displayed in a dashboard on a particular dashboard or any open dashboards that you have, as long as you've set up that synchronization. So I'm just going to make sure that both of these are saved. Now the other element we can bring in here is just to make this a little bit cleaner. Now the model I've got open, this expenses one, is really quite straightforward. I've got one input dash and then a summary dashboard. If we imagine that this is maybe a much more detailed P&L, you could have a number of input modules, not just the one that I have here. And you want to be making sure that you're entering data at the same level as you go from dashboard to dashboard, input module to input module. So for example, always entering data for the same department, region, project. So rather than just controlling it via one of the drop downs in one of the modules you have displayed, what we can do is set up some labels that sit at the top of the dashboard that really make it obvious the choices and selections that you're making. So if we just come to our actual module, so let's say expenses input, and you'll notice here I've got dimension wise, I've got expense type. I've also got, so that I can enter multiple lines of expense, I just happen to have a dimension that's 1 to 50. Obviously that could be 1 to 60, 1 to 100, whatever that needs to be, by employee and by expense period, so by time. If I come to view here on the left, you see your dashboard publish options sit at the bottom of that menu. And at the bottom you have publish page selectors to dashboard. So I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to put that into my expenses dashboard, so the input dashboard. If I scroll down to the bottom, there you'll notice all of those dimension labels that we talked about from that expenses input module. So here they are published to the dashboard. Now I'm not interested in selecting a particular line, so I'm going to take that away, or an expense type, so I'm going to take that away as well. What I do want is to be able to make an employee selection and a time period selection. What I now want to do is rearrange this, so bring those up to the top, make them much more prominent. So I've selected rearrange dashboard from my expenses menu, just bring them up a little bit at a time. I'm going to sit those there at the top. So now that I've finished and I'm happy with that layout, I'm just going to say exit layout mode over here towards the right. And I'm going to save my dashboard. And now what we'll see is I achieve the same result by selecting from my page labels here at the top. So it doesn't actually change the functionality. You can see again that that's followed all the way through. Here's October, looking at this employee. So it doesn't change the functionality. The end result is still the same. But you can see that's making your selection options much more obvious. And like I said, if you imagine this in a much more detailed P&L environment with lots of input modules, making those selections so that you're being very aware about, as I said, department, region, project, whatever your hierarchy might be, just makes that a bit cleaner and a bit slicker. So that's just a quick tip on dashboards, page labels, and synchronization.